Okay, I think we can start again. So the next presentation is by Dr. Jérôme Frei from the Federal Office for the Environment in Switzerland and Dr. Tobias Roth from the company Hintermann and Weber. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's nice to be here and hear all this insight from the different countries in plant and pollinator monitoring. Yes, with Tobias, we have shared a presentation. I will introduce and give a bit of landscape of the monitoring program we have in Switzerland. And Tobias will show a couple of results of one of the program on plant and pollinator. We have a couple of programs in Switzerland that have data, collecting data on biodiversity, but I will say that the three major ones that collect data on plants and also on pollinators, although limited, are the BDM and ALIMA and VBS. The oldest one is the BDM, that's the Biodiversity Monitoring of Switzerland, and the aim of this program was really to build up a structured monitoring and measuring biodiversity, common biodiversity in common Swiss landscape. So we are speaking here more about common species, often found in common Swiss landscapes. And that program was really, the main aim was monitoring. And then later on, that's the blue box. In 2011, we also launched a program on monitoring biodiversity in protected areas. And that's the monitoring of effectiveness of habitat conservation. And the focus here is really protected habitats, and it covers more rarer species and habitats. And the aim there was really to evaluate if protection measures on these habitats are effective. And the output of this program is also used by the practice for early detection of changes. Then in 2015, we also introduced the ALIMA program. This is a densification of the BDM grid in agricultural landscape, and that program really aims at analyzing the trends of biodiversity in agricultural landscape, but also evaluating the effectiveness of agri-environmental policies. To explain a bit more, the BDM has three sampling grid. One is at the landscape level, and this is this counts 450 square kilometers, where we do transects of 2.5 kilometers, and the organisms that we collect there are plants, butterflies, and breeding birds. And then there is also in the same squares, we do a sampling grid on the habitat level. This is close to 1,500 times 10 square meters, where we record plants, mosses, and mollusks. And we can calculate indicators on habitat level for forests, meadows, and pastures, and urban areas, arable land, and mountainous habitat. More recently, we also introduced a sampling grid on section on water, surface water, where we also collect data on aquatic insects. As I said before, ALIMA, this is the monitoring of biodiversity in farmland, and this is 170 of the 450 square kilometers of BDM. We do a densified observation of plant and habitat diversity, and we really developed this program building up on BDM because this program can also benefit from the data on butterflies and birds from the BDM. And that program also aims at really looking at the effect of agri-environmental policy, in particular the biodiversity promotion area, because in Switzerland farmers do have to have at least 7% of the area in as biodiversity promotion areas. And the aim is really here to see if these measures are beneficial for biodiversity. Yeah, both BDM and ALEMA have a cycle of 5 years. So we cover the whole grid every 5 years. Just to mention, of course, we have this monitoring program, but we also more and more make the link with national statistics. It's just an example to show, because often people who are focused on monitoring biodiversity tend to forget that there are a lot of national statistics and possibilities to make links with monitoring programs. And here is just an example of pollination. We do have an indicator in Switzerland where we quantify the cropland that is benefiting from insect pollination. And here, for example, we see that this cropland, the area, the surface is increasing. It's not super relevant for the topic today, but I often say try to not forget that there are other data, that you can link them together, that you can do some interesting analysis on them. The last program that is focused on those protected habitats, that's the VBS. And you see here on the Swiss map, you see all the habitats. There are about 7,000 habitats that are protected. And these habitats represent only 2.3% of the Swiss area, but they harbor a lot of threatened species. And in those habitats, we survey every 6 years. We cover 6,900 plots of 10 square meters in about 800 objects for the vegetation sampling. And we also look at amphibians in those habitats. And something that covers all the habitats is we analyze our aerial photos. So we check how these habitats are evolving in terms of vegetation cover, and if new infrastructure are built in this habitat. These habitats are mainly dry meadows and pasture, fence and bogs, amphibian breeding areas, and alluvial areas. We heard a lot of things this morning. I always say we heard how do you ensure that you have stable funding, and I always say make the data useful for everyone, for the researcher, the policy makers, and also just for knowledge on biodiversity. And this is a good example where we used the data from all 3 programs, and we compare conventional grasslands, well, meadows and pasture, with meadows and pasture in a biodiversity promotion area in farmland, sorry, and compared with also protected meadows and pasture. And we see that the biodiversity promotion area implemented by farmer really allow increase of biodiversity by plants and butterflies, and that we find even more biodiversity in protected dry meadows and pasture. And it might look really simple, but it's really important to communicate to politicians, look, the money we are investing in biodiversity promotion now by farmers, that helps, and the protection measure we do in the protected habitat are important as well. What I also like about this graph is that we really use the data pool from all 3 programs. We are more and more in Switzerland converging to a common data pool, common data indicator list, and we really merge all the programs more, and all our data flow into one database, which also in turn, of course, flows into GBIF, because Switzerland is also a member state of the GBIF initiative. Of course, we have also in Switzerland the red lists. I mentioned them because every time we we do a red list, we renew a red list that's about all 10, 15 years. We need additional data collection, and these data also flow in the same databases. And I won't go into detail, but it's also an important tool in Switzerland to monitor how species are threatened. And just last Friday, we published the new red list on bees. So yes, so well, that's also an important tool for us. And before I give the word to Toby, and who will show you more analysis on, in particular based on BDM data. Yeah, there is no targeted program on pollinator in Switzerland, but we have a fair plant and butterfly monitoring coverage. Again, it's important to think about the end users of this program, and I really, if it's possible to have to publish research, to use it for policy evaluation, many use it really helps to ensure sustainability of these programs, and then they have a real value when they need to last in time, and also something we really think it's important to maximize, develop, exploit synergies between data sets, and we managed to do really nice analysis. Recently, we really got nice papers. And maybe outlook, we are currently investigating if we could monitor wild bees in farmland, so possibility for integrating wild bees in the ALIMA program. And by butterflies, we want to consolidate a bit because some protected area like fence and bogs are not well covered. And also something recently that also a development field that we see is the money we just recently conducted a pilot study on genetic diversity. And it was really interesting to see that we can have a lot of information with just one-shot analysis. We conducted the pilot studies on 5 flagship species, and we will surely this next year we will spend some time on these 3 development possibilities. Well, I give the words to Toby.
Well, thank you, Jérôme. So you know a bit now about the background, and I have the nice job to present you some of the results. We picked mainly results from the BDM program, and mainly about plants and butterflies. And the nice thing there is that they're collected on exactly on the same sites, on the same transect within the 1 kilometer squares, and also in the same year. Usually the first indicator of what we start when we present results is about simple species richness, about those species group, and you might be a bit surprised. It looks rather good from this graph, so it seems to be increase, so species richness seems to increase a bit. We have to say this is only, like, as Jérôme said, the common normal landscape, of course, and it started only in 2001 for plants, or 2003 for butterflies. So it started really on low level. But then when we go a bit more on details on species level, then we see a lot of the different patterns. There is some species are increasing and others are suffering a lot. And here is just an example from the butterfly index. So it's mainly, the first thing is to calculate the trend per species, and then we aggregate per species group. And here it's the warm-dwelling species that are doing well, increasing, and the cold-dwelling species are suffering a lot. And you have some examples below. And yeah, cold-dwelling species are really the alpine species. And to the very right, you have a nice example. So this is really a species that is just living in the very high Alps. Another thing, when we look at beta diversity, or how diverse the species communities are, then we see in both groups really a decrease. So It's an indication that it's the same species that are increasing at all the sites and similar species that are decreasing, and it's more like the common species that are increasing and the less common ones that are decreasing. Here's just an example. I mean, we see a lot of indication that climate change has a strong influence on the species communities, but of course there is also the nature protection that has an influence. And here we just plotted the number of indicator species for now also give the results from birds for those 3 species groups. And on the x-axis we have the area of protected areas in the sites. But it's not only the core protected areas, but also the regional ones and the biodiversity promotion areas. And we see like the more we have, the more species we have in these sites. But maybe the more important insight there is that all those sites with a lot of like protected or ecological infrastructure, there is quite few of them. So you see to the right, it's always like very few plots. So one of the goals of policy would be to increase this infrastructure, then also to promote species diversity. As I said, there is a lot of indication of climate change. Here I plotted for different species groups how they change in elevation. So this is elevational shift per 10 years, what we observe. So for instance, for the plants, like the plant communities that we observed 10 years ago are now about 30 meters higher than currently 30 meters higher. And the main point here is also that, I mean, they go all in the same direction, so it's always an upwards migration, but the speed is very different between the species groups. And I think that's an important point, mainly when we talk about, for instance, plants and butterflies. The change is not at all the same, so this will cause problems, most probably. So summary so far, yes, we have an increase in species richness, but when we look closer, then we also see that there is a lot of species that decline. And when we take all together, then is a strong sign of homogenization of the species communities. And yeah, as I said, an important point is that the pace of change differs between species and between species groups. And then the question raises how this might affect plant and pollinators, for instance. And here, Jérôme said, we don't have a specific program, but we can try to analyze plants specifically and then also relate them to butterflies to find out a bit. And here we just looked really at the plants and how how the different plant groups are changing. So we made 3 groups, one with open disc, so they're pollinated by insects, but probably more the general ones, and then the ones with complex structure, so that there is more specific interaction between pollinators, and then the wind-pollinator. And it's clearly the wind-pollinated that increased the most. As I said, we have an increase since 2001, so all 3 groups are increasing a bit, but it's mainly the wind-pollinated species that are increasing. And we can go a bit further with the same, so it's still only plants data, but grouped by the different pollinators they have. And again, to the very right, it's the wind-pollinated that have the strongest increase. And you see there the butterflies, or the plants that are pollinated by butterflies are the ones that increase the less. What this might cause in future, here is a study we tried to predict for butterflies and for their hosts, so for plant species where the caterpillars are feeding. We made a prediction how it will change based on climate change. And then to the right, you have the prediction for the host, for this example, and for the butterfly. And the general pattern was that because usually butterflies, they're changing faster, so they're also moving faster upwards, that at the upper limit of their range, there will be no host plant anymore in future. Of course, there was a modeling approach, but the model predicted for half of the butterflies, they will have strong problems in future, and we will see how this will change. And it's a bit similar to what I showed before with this upwards migration with the whole community. So it's just plants that move upwards less fast than butterflies. Because we have data for plants and butterflies on the same sites, we can also try to show how, when there is an effect for some factors on plants, how this will affect butterflies. And here what we did, we checked how nitrogen deposition from the air will change plants. This is well known that the more nitrogen there is from the air, the less diverse is the plant community. But we could also show that this has a strong effect and also on the butterflies. And then to the right, when we just correlate the sites where there is a lot of nitrogen deposition, the threatened species are decreasing most, but all butterfly species are decreasing where there is a lot of nitrogen deposition. And I just like to end maybe with two examples that were very surprising. So we can do a lot of models, but I think there will always be, nature will always surprise us in some way. And this was an example of, or it's just an example of two butterfly species. And let's see whether it will work.
It does.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, this is just this species that was very rare in Switzerland, like when we started with the monitoring. And there is this rumor or saying that in the starting, when butterfly people came together to start the monitoring, they were going to a place to see this species. And now, like 20 years later, it's all in the whole lowland where it wasn't before. And I think nobody could predict that. And the same is for this species, Pieris money, that also increased a lot lately. So it's really that some species, and there is also, of course, the opposite, that some species are really decreasing and nobody knows exactly why. So in summary, I think we see a lot of influence of climate change when we try to analyze which factors are affecting how species communities are changing. And for me, these cascading effects, so there is a factor affecting on plants, and this will then change also butterflies, is very important, and that is usually a bit overseen. But I also want to emphasize these like examples that really change a lot in their distribution, and we couldn't predict. And I think these are also a good example why we really need monitoring programs and not only models, because yeah, for some species the models don't work, and I think there is also a lot of interest and a lot we can learn from those species. So thanks a lot.